Hello. Ah, damn those enterprise companies. All right. As you saw in the explanations here today, I'm supposed to be talking about progressive web apps, which is something that I'm working on right now and I'm very excited about. And progressive web apps, I wanted to make it shorter for you because everybody's talking about progressive web apps. Every conference that's happening right now, every company has some ideas about it. There's a lot of fake ideas about it, but in general, it's not hard to find it. You can use Google or you can use Bing. That's also a search engine. If you Google for it, you find it. And you can then find information about PWAs. And PWAs, in essence, are a development approach of using a set of technologies that allows web content to be app-like experiences, including offline functionality, notifications, and device access. And the new parts of the stack are the app manifest, which tells you that this is not a website, but it's an app. So a search engine can index it as an app and display it as an app, and people can install it as an app without having to go through that horrible thing of having to go to a marketplace and give their credit card, a pint of blood, and a newborn before they can actually start downloading the application. The service worker is a scriptable HTTP client, so to say, in JavaScript, where you can intersect with what your app is doing and when it's going to a network and do things to the data when it goes in between the two of them. That's what we're having. I'm working on PWA Builder, which is a great thing to get explanations that are much more concise of what I said right now. And it's also a thing where you can turn your website into a PWA by giving it the URL, by creating the web manifest, by creating a service worker for offline functionality, and create binary apps for older Android, iOS, and Windows Store, and Windows 7, which you shouldn't support anymore, but you should all could upgrade. And this is a hack event, though. So I'm like, okay, you're not going to build PWAs tomorrow because that is just a set of or a form factor of something that you want to build. So I did a bit of research and I looked a bit of thinking about myself what I could do about this. And that's when I said I'm actually saying the PWA talk is canceled for today. You're going to see another one. You're going to see one that I think should be much more interesting because I want to think about coding and building something with code, and we're all very excited about code as the thing to do. Now, I work for the little startup from Redmond, as I said. I'm CodePoet on Twitter, and I live on those two worlds right now. I joined Microsoft 2 years ago, came from Mozilla, so that's a bit like being in the Rebel Alliance and going to the Death Star. But in essence, both of them are the same thing. You see that later when you work longer in the Rebel Alliance than I did. So I've been developing for 20 years. For 20 years, I've been professionally being paid for doing things. I've been professionally paid for writing JavaScript for about 5 years until I wrote my first book, and then I understood what JavaScript was. Because if you write a book, you cannot pretend to know it anymore, you have to know it. Because people ask you questions that are hard to answer. And you cannot just make up with yeah, it's used jQuery, or whatever, people normally answer there. So I want to sacrifice the golden calf of coding. I want to go away from code being almost a religion, being almost a dogma that everything has to be in code. I hate when I hear people say good code explains itself. Yeah, if it's your code explaining to you how you were at that moment when you wrote it. When you write code drunk and you look at it 2 days later, you realize there's a difference between good code explains itself. So what do you do when you're bored is what I do when I get bored. I go on Twitter and I do something that nobody on Twitter ever does, which is make very, very grandiose statements without any proof. Nobody does that on Twitter. I thought I'd start a new way of using Twitter. So I said, prediction in 5 years, most of what we call coding now will be done by machines, and they'll be much better at it. I work a lot with machine learning and artificial intelligence environments right now because I like to push myself. I like to work with people that scare me, how clever they are and what they do, and I have no idea what I do with them. And that made me basically my career. I always pushed myself to get further and surround me by people that are better than me. This could be you. This is probably you. I defined, for example, a few JavaScript patterns, and I go to hackathons, and people are like, we used your JavaScript pattern, it does this and that. And I'm like, oh, that's what it does. I wanted to write less code. That's why I invented that one. Okay, fair enough, but cool, thanks. So make sure you always push for, get people around you that are better than you or different than you, because you can learn from them and not like be the person in the corner like, oh my God, there's a JavaScript carousel to show images. There's only 600 of them on NPM right now. I probably should write another one because mine is going to be better. No, go to another one, say what annoys you about it, and fix it and help other people with it. And when I brought this up, of course, people said like the whole thing, oh, it's like, Chris, you're talking about future stuff again. We've been talking about machines, writing machines for years and years, and automation. And it's true. My department in Microsoft where I'm working on is called PAX. And this is its logo. And that's as much as I knew about it when I joined it. And I thought PAX is Latin for peace, and we bring peace to space. We don't. It's like partner application experience group. So we do different things right now, but we got the logo, so that's pretty cool. And machine learning and AI is hot. When I talk to people about it, or if you want to get funding right now, you just go to a pub in the Silicon Valley and you just mumble machine learning or cryptocurrency, and people give you money. This is kind of how it works, because we still don't know what the hell it actually is. We try to make machines better and these kind of things. I love this. Letting robots kill without human supervision could save lives. Well, not the people they killed, but I don't know where they're going with this. It's probably make a better soldier by making it ruthless. I don't know. And everybody is worried about automation. I worked with the German government before about automation and what it means to the job market. And I had a room of like this full of people. All of them had companies with 200,000 plus people working for them. And I was standing there telling them about like, well, 80% of you are replaced by Amazon already. And you don't even know it yet. Because you're basically not letting your people be people. You're trying to make your people computers that are crap or robots that get tired. So make sure that actually your humanness, what makes you a human, is actually the job satisfaction we have in the future. Machines will be faster and better at doing the repetitive, boring tasks that humans are not meant to do. And the heat is on. As AI and automation is such a huge thing, we're actually now looking at like making software or AI systems that write AI systems. That sounds dangerous to me because there's no ethics in there. There's no human thinking about it in there, but also there's no greed in there and there's no stupidity in there with humans. So it's always quite funny that we're scared of artificial intelligence, but we're not quite looking into human intelligence. And when I look at the latest voting that people do, I'm worried about that as well. So the blanket solution from governments and from city governments and from companies and schools is like, everybody must learn how to code. Like how many code camps and boot camps came out and said like, you know what, you're going to be replaced by a computer in a self-driving car, but if you know how to write Ruby next week, you're going to be fine. And I find this the most boring and most lazy solution for everything. It's people that don't know what computers do and what programmers do, and they're like, the coding thing, that's like speaking. You know, it's like syntax and words, and if you know that, then you'll be safe. Like, I mean, I love companies that support people to become developers because their job is boring or whatever. But all these like Cinderella stories, like this 16-year-old, this 50-year-old basically didn't know what to do. He learned JavaScript and now he's got his own company and so many users out there. And I'm like, yeah, okay, fair enough. Nice headline, nice press release, but I'm not quite sure what's going on there. So let's rewind for a bit. There's a great talk by Brett Victor, a great guy anyways. I heard weird guy, but the talk is pretty amazing. It's called The Future of Programming, and it's worrydream.com/dbx. And he pretends to be a programmer from 1973 that talks about what computing in 20 years will be like, or in 30 years will be like. And it's hilarious because he finds all these solutions from in between that had such wonderful ideas of what computing and programming should be like, and none of them came true. We're still super excited that when Windows 10 got a Unix shell, everybody's like, finally Windows is doing something I want. And you're like, what? You know, this 1975 thing that we put in there made you excited. Like the artificial intelligence that listens to you and does things with you is not as exciting. Okay, fair enough. But this is a really nice talk because he shows how in these times where computing was very basic and very limited, people had dreams. People had ideas what programming should be like. And nowadays, we just basically go back there. We basically say, oh, well, if you don't know the command line, you're not a CSS developer. How the fuck are these two related? That makes no sense. You know, like it's generating CSS with Sass and things like that makes sense, but I shouldn't need to know Unix to write CSS. I should know how an interface works. I should know how layouting works. I should have a visual eye of something beautiful, not like how to set up 50 different things to make my CSS 13 lines and generate 360 lines, these kind of things. To me, coding, the term coding, was never used professionally, but I learned it in the demo scene. I was doing demo scene stuff, probably most of you too young to remember that, or you just see it from time to time. But we did amazingly creative and beautiful things that nobody needed. And we spent a lot of time trying to beat each other, who's the better coder, without actually getting any money from that or any sense in that. It was just like, whoa, I can do this. So coding in the demo scene, to me, in my case on a Commodore 64, slightly on Amiga, a bit of PlayStation, was programming in a creative fashion, pushing the boundaries of limited environments. Like, can you do a 3D cube in a machine that's 1 megahertz processor with 64K of RAM? Yes, you can. The math behind it is actually the same as with faster computers, but you have to do all kind of tricky things. You had to know everything the computer does, what every chip does, how the thing works. But the creativity of it was the main point. We wanted to do something that other people hadn't managed to do with those computers, and it had to look cool and amazing and impressive. So performance was the most important thing because the machines were super limited. Cleverness was also very important, so nobody else had done that. Inventiveness was important. We invented new effects all the time. That's a DYCP, a TCC, that's a plasma scroller, that's a walking cube, that's a ray tracers and these kind of things simulated from that one as well. The maintainability was not that important because the next step was to write a new one. And the readability was actually negative because you wanted not other people to know how you've done that because there were charts, you know, like much like a lot of people in enterprise, make sure that people don't know the system so they actually stay there for the next 50 years. So when I went away from this and my parents started to say like, you should make money and leave the house because you're 18, I just ended up being a coder for the demo scene and started becoming a programmer, developer, engineer, creator, maker. One business card I had said HTML monkey, and I still got money, so I didn't care. So when that happened, I realized that my coding style or my programming style had to change, or I thought my programming style had to change. So being a nice person, I thought I have to work with more people, so my code should actually be more maintainable and more readable because I could get hit by a bus and other people should be able to use my stuff and do something with it. It didn't need to be that clever because basically there was nothing asked of me. This was 1997, 1998, when people like, we want a website, what should it do? Show text and maybe a logo, that'd be cool. That's basically what they asked me of me, and I'm like, okay, fair enough. Performance was not a problem either, because browsers did nothing that actually would slow down the computer. So it was basically like, oh, okay, nested tables were a bad thing, or you had to cut up your tables into several tables so they render one by one. So these kind of things were important, but performance was not that much of a thing. Inventiveness was fully out of the window. They basically had a designer that gave you a printout and said, like, turn this into this HTML thing, or whatever it's called, and then people click on it, we make millions, and we share the money, I guess. So, let's tell you a quick story, the curious case of a button. I started working in a company, I think it was 1998, in Munich, Germany. People very much known to actually be creative and open to new technologies all the time. So, no. We had a client that was an e-commerce website. Back then, this meant that they showed their goods, and it had a basket written in Perl, and the rest of the page was basically static HTML pages. Not like static site generators that we have now, but static HTML pages that got FTP'd over. So the process was they used Access. Don't know if you remember that. That's like somebody who thinks he knows databases but hates them and wants to have an interface instead. So they used Access to write the database, and then they sent it to us, and then they had 3 HTML developers that copied and pasted the texts out of the Access database into HTML pages, saved them, and FTP'd them over. This was 3 weeks of delivery after we got the new database every month. So I started joining that company, and I looked at that, and I'm like, why don't we script that in Access? I'm like, what do you mean? You can write macros in Access to generate stuff, so we can actually take the database and write templates for HTML and generate the HTML from that. I can create you a button for that. He's like, how long would that take? And I'm like, give me 2 hours. It was VB script, you know? It's a language, if you hate syntax and like to write viruses, it's a wonderful language to use. And I basically looked at it, and I'm like, okay, fair enough. I wrote a button and pressed a button, and the website was done, and we FTP'd it over. And he's like, cool. We can't change the contract, so we're still going to bill them for 3 weeks of work, but this is good. Thanks for starting to work here. The other thing that this company did was ask us for 15-minute timesheets. Like every 15 minutes, what have you done? And as a web developer, that was like slicing up images, writing tables, looking up what browser bugs were, kind of thing. And of course, me being having a weird humor, I started filling in the timesheet every month and every week and stuff. And they were angry about me because that's not the thing to do. And I'm like, I'm just being honest. This is what I spent most of my time on. This makes no sense, this kind of reporting that we're having here. And then I realized Excel can also be scripted. So I wrote myself a button that actually filled it with random HTML web developer tasks and emailed it automatically to my boss at the end of the day. And I got a bonus for being the employee with the cleanest timesheet of everybody else after that. And I'm like, cool. So I learned one thing there, and that is professional development is actually moving away from, wow, how did you do that? Like the demo scene was all about, or we talked to each other about. And it actually goes to, have you finished this? The one who finishes first wins. The one who ships first wins. Doesn't matter how horrible that result is, doesn't matter how quality is going down the drain, it has to be out there. How many times have you been asked in your job to say like, oh, I know it's bad, but let's fix that quickly now, and then next week we get time to fix it? It's a lie. It's a blatant lie. You never get time to fix it. You just remove it from your CV 2 weeks later and never ever look at it again and get drunk and hate life and these kind of things. So in essence, substitution is what we do as developers. Instead of writing code, we do reusable things. I write a little button, I collect my little scripts that actually do one thing well and reuse them over and over again. This was me on a Skype call the other day when I had to go to the kitchen and I put our dog there and he basically just looked at them. It took them 5 minutes to find out it wasn't me. I guess it's the curls. I don't know what's going on. Yeah, I loved how fascinated he was of him. He's deaf, he can't hear them, but still he was fascinated by the pictures, so cool. So as a developer, our own level up is a personalized development environment, tooling, and code snippets. I had code snippets for everything that I wanted to do, even back then when I used what did I use? Notepad++ and these kind of things. And I knew how setting up my terminal this way, setting up my build scripts that way, writing my dot files for my Unix environment, and finding tools that automate things like image generation and these kind of things makes me a better developer because I'm more efficient with my time. Back then, we didn't do much sharing. Nowadays, we share up front. GitHub is freaking amazing. I love being on GitHub. I love that we have that. I love hiring people by looking at their GitHub stuff. And I don't even much look at their code. I actually look more how they deal with other people, how they deal with annoying pull requests, how they actually write pull requests, and how they comment their stuff to other people. Because in the end, you will be part of a team. You will not be the 10-time developer sitting there and getting money thrown at them. This is a stupid idea. You have to build teams sooner or later. So we're good at inventing and advocating best practices. I loved that the other day as well, where I said, if one of the main principles of good code is don't repeat yourself, why do we keep talking about it? Because there's so many don't repeat yourself talks all saying the same thing. It's kind of weird. But let's go. We're not so good at making best practices. This is a website of sorts. And I found this in there, for example, the TR class spacer style height 5 pixels. And my favorite is the class a thing. You know, when you go to a CSS file and you find .a thing, you're like, what is going on there? And this is the kind of code I would have expected from 1999, 1989, 1998, these kind of things. It's actually not. It's actually from Hacker News. It's live right now. And the reason is, that's the question. What's the reason? Why do we write this kind of things? We know better. We have documentation, we have best practices, we have videos, we've got trainings, we've got more YouTube videos and YouTube tutorials that you could ever look at, and we create this crap. And the reason is because people are people. There's a legacy problem. People don't always upgrade like we'd love them to, and this means we need to support old, terrible ideas. I worked with supermarkets lately. I found mainframes in production. Things with like cards that you put in and things like that I only know from movies. And I see them in production nowadays. We see people that the viruses that are going right now, the ransomware that attacks Windows XP machines is a successful thing in 2017 hurts me. You know, I don't mind if you have a Windows XP machine running somewhere to show a display, but why the hell is this thing online? Just if you're that much behind, just put a USB stick in there 2 times a day. You probably don't want to update it anyways. We've got the protect the user problem. Browsers have to favor the end user because from programmer mistakes. Lazy developers see it as a carte blanche. This is a basic design principle of HTML and CSS. Whatever the developer can do wrong, the end user should still see something. It's really hard to make HTML not display anything. It was easy with Netscape 4. Just don't close the table tag and it will never render. But nowadays, browsers are so forgiving and we put so much effort into making browsers show you things that end users will never be punished from our mistakes. They will be punished with our PHP mistakes, Java mistakes, and so on and so forth. But this is not there to protect the developer. This is not there to make you lazy and say like, well, I just use diffs and spans because the browser does something with that anyways. No, a button is available to a blind user. And it also is clickable and it's keyboard accessible and it's a great thing to use. Learn your trade before you actually go there. We may make browsers protect our end users, not to make you lazier. But sadly enough, when I look at what's out on the web, I keep seeing these same mistakes. There's also a development appreciation gap. If how we do things isn't as appreciated as how fast it's done, we find ways to automate our work. Basically like I did with the timesheet. Like if there's nothing more embarrassing than when you got some director coming in or something, or some client, and the person, your manager, middle manager goes in front of you and like, oh, that's Chris, that's one of our developers. He did some great work with your website, and you friggin' hate that website. And you think like it's shit, and you should have done so much better, and you asked 5 times to get more time to fix it, and they praise you because you don't understand what you've been doing. So we just like, you know what, next time I just copy and paste something from Stack Overflow because you don't understand what I'm doing anyways, and I find my time surfing the internet or whatever. Now, writing Perl CGI in 1997 was an interesting thing to do. The first thing you did was you get a client request. I want a mailing list. Cool. You go to Matt's script archive, and you randomly download one, and then you change things around until it resembles what the client wants and stops breaking with a 500, and if necessary, chmod it to 777, make everything writable, and it's going to be great. It's going to be running forever, and everybody can send mails, not only the client, but everybody else as well. And then you basically invoice and you hide under a rock. And this was normal. These things are still running because we're lazy and we basically weren't appreciating, we don't understand what we're doing. We're just like, okay, if I don't get the time to learn this, I might as well use something else. Oh, npm installed this? What are these 5,000 dependencies? Probably safe. Not to worry, they're gonna be fine. So how do we find appreciation when our bosses and managers and clients don't actually give us the appreciation that we need for the job that we do? Not personally, I don't want clients to come up and appreciate me personally, that'd be weird. But like at least looking at my code and saying like, that's better than the other stuff. We kind of go underground. What we do is actually we talk on dedicated channels to those in the know, and this is where that exploded the last few years with like the Stack Overflows, the GitHub, the Slacks. We actually get away from the main market and the people that we work for, and we talk to each other because this is much better, because we're tired of talking to people who don't understand us. So fixing code nowadays works this way. You create an available version of your code, CodePen, Gist, JSBin, JSFiddle, which is pretty good to do because these are great things to explain something to somebody. Like explaining why your code breaks on a mailing list is impossible. But make a JSFiddle and say like, hey, or a JSBin, and say like, look at this, what's broken here. People can code it, can fork it, can do something, send it back to you, and go on. Then you go to Stack Overflow and post your problem, and then you abandon all hope of getting a straight answer. Because what's happening there is a mosh pit of ideas and basically biases. So you get well versed after a while in filtering out feedback from various levels of dysfunctional human communication. Because everybody tells you like, oh, this is the right thing to do. No, you're not doing it right. Your semicolon is missing. You're putting the curly brace on the other line. You're using tabs and spaces like an animal. These kind of things. And then you find the answer in the maelstrom of just use $X or well actually. So there's a lot of explanations on there. And they're like, I had a defined problem. Don't tell me that I should use React for that. I just wonder why this doesn't work. But this is how we work right now. There is a professional way of doing that. A much, much faster way, if anybody of you ever had that to do. And I found that out quite easily. You go to Stack Overflow. You describe your coding problem with an obviously wrong solution and call it a best practice. Then you get popcorn. And then you follow the mosh pit of ideas and biases, and you find the one good solution that crops up. So you don't have to do the work. You just let people fight, and you just sit back and like, great, oh, this looks good. Let's take that one. We're better at doing than at explaining needs and values. I just started watching Star Trek again, and I love this quote where it's like, what you need is some editorial skill in your self-expression. Between impulse and action, there's a realm of good taste betting for your acquaintance. I get that as answers on Stack Overflow for you a few times. That's why I'm not wanted there anymore. But I like that kind of like, don't act immediately. Think about why would a person ask a question that seems incredibly stupid to you. There might be a reason why it is. Ask for that reason first instead of telling people that they're stupid and they shouldn't be programmers and so on. So how do we find happiness? Appreciation is one thing, but happiness is more interesting. And that's where we go even deeper. We collect and describe reusable code and patterns. And this is what we've been creating for quite a long time. This started with the jQuery and jQuery plugins, and then GitHub came around, and now we got NPM, now we got all the other package managers out there that like, here's my solution, and it worked for me, please use it as well. The problem is that it's a digital hoarding thing that we're doing. We package reusable code and patterns up in frameworks, libraries, tooling, and processes. So instead of having simple solutions that people could mix and match, we just make them bigger and bigger and bigger and add more and more and more. This has to be a paradigm now. This cannot only be a script. This has to be installed with that, and it's relying on that framework and do these kind of things. All in good faith, all in good ideas. But we kind of like created this massive data set that the average website is 2.2 meg big. And if you're on like, I was in Albania, and my roaming was like 12 pounds a megabyte. This means like going to your website is the same price as a cinema ticket to a great movie, so your website better be as good. The problem with code that is generic and reusable is that they're bigger code bases and have more computational overhead. As we saw earlier, it's like, okay, now, as he said earlier, we got 500 meg for a node thing to start even, and we got like a few megabytes to actually use React on something because we want to build this in a certain way rather than the end user, thinking of the end user and saying like, okay, what about the 2 megabyte that they shouldn't be downloading because it's only a button that fires confetti or something. So more tools and processes is that we then build to strip the overhead before shipping it to the end user. So we create all these things that are usable and bigger and more complex, and then we create Webpack to take all the things out that haven't been used. And we actually make developer tools that find out which CSS wasn't used and remove that one before we actually do it in there. So instead of in the build process, instead of putting it there, we go another level of like down deeper the rabbit hole and do something else for the end user. So the question with that one is now, when people start becoming developers, becoming web developers especially, have we raised the bar too high for people to starting new? And Ben Howdle the other day tweeted about that. Do you ever stop and think maybe people are overthinking engineering front-end development? And I feel like that. I've done that for 20 years. I worked on 3 browsers. I'm working on a browser right now, and I'm working on a project right now that will be browser-based, and I know how a JavaScript engine works, I know how a CSS engine works, I know the inner things we had to do just to make the web not break. And at the same time, I look at like a tutorial that says like, here is what functional programming is, and here is how the virtual DOM is necessary for that thing, and I'm like, what? I'm stupid, I'm old, I want to go goat farming. And I don't want to learn all these things anymore. Or is it actually that we're teaching ways that we know it worked for us but are outdated? I'm totally happy to say what I did in 1997 is stupid to do nowadays. And it would be a sad case, a sad state of affairs, if best practices from 2000 in HTML would still be the thing to do. We have to move on with the platform as well and make it better. So Sean Larkin, who we just hired, who is one of the maintainers of Webpack, in fact, we're actually realizing the way we used to ship code was egregiously slow. He looked that up, I'm quite sure. Inaccessible and not interoperable. Welcome to front-end engineering. And he calls it front-end engineering rather than web development or coding. And I think, you know what? If it's a professional thing that we get paid a lot of money for, maybe that's something to think about. I feel overwhelmed by it. I'm not quite sure that the solutions we have right now are the right solutions, but just writing everything by hand every single time to start from, coding and being really, really cool in it, I don't think that's actually maintainable and necessary anymore in 2017. We have amazing tooling and helpers at our disposal. This is the Firefox, is it Firefox? Yes. This is Firefox right now. If I had that in 1998 or in 2000, I would have given you my finger. I mean, back then we had alert boxes and hoped we didn't put them in a for loop, so we got endlessly pressing the enter button just to stop moving or reboot the computer because the browser hang. And now we got like insights into the performance, insights into when the browser is painting something, when it's actually doing calculations. We can do stack traces of our JavaScript. It's pretty amazing what browsers do for us. And we even have visual interfaces to build great things like CSS animations and these kind of things. So browsers come with excellent development and debugging tools. And this is now down there is F12, which is the Edge or IE one, the Edge one, fuck IE. And there is Chrome with all the other cool stuff that they have as well. We're starting to actually learn programming in these environments. We're starting to use them. When I redesigned my blog, I redesigned it fully in the Firefox developer tools. I didn't use anything else. One afternoon I was bored, I started messing around with the CSS in the editor, and out of a sudden I managed my CSS, and I got out all this JavaScript because I don't need it for blogging, and I made my layout just in the browser bit by bit, and that is actually cool. Editors are open, extensible, and integrate with your workflows and environments. So this is Visual Studio Code. I worked on that one as well, and I find this so cool. It's the editor I use to write TypeScript, and it's written in TypeScript. So I can write the editor that I'm using in the language that I'm using it for, which is so wonderfully meta. And it's just great that basically our tools, think about this, what we're using to build code nowadays, these tools are open source, available for us to play with and extend to our likes. All of them have plugins, all of them have themes, all of them can be changed to your needs. I started working with a lot of startups that teach coding or teach development to people who are completely out of left field, that are actually not normally coming to these events, that are not doing that. So what I started with Visual Studio Code is what I love about it, first of all, is like that there is the GitHub integration. So instead of explaining GitHub and explaining Git and explaining the terminal to people, I just say like, okay, you just changed that file. Now it's turned from green to red because there was a change. You need to comment what you changed and then press this button, and people will know that it has been changed. It goes back to the server. So whatever you do next, don't worry about it because you can always go back to that version that works. Much like we save our files like, say number one, number two, save, now really save, really this time it works kind of thing. Git is not easy to understand for somebody who actually just learns coding, and we shouldn't throw that barrier in their way as the first thing. It also has the debugger in the browser, in the editor, so I can put a breakpoint in my JavaScript and get the debugging of the JavaScript directly in my editor. I don't like IDEs. IDEs had that stuff all the time, and every professional developer always kept telling me you should use IDEs. And yeah, of course, I want to download 13 gig to actually have a make command on my Unix shell. That's a really good idea. But I love that we're getting with our text editors in a world where developing makes more sense to people as well. What I loved as well was installing linters for people. So while they were writing JavaScript, it got squiggly lines under it and told them like, hey, there's something wrong. And before they even executed it in the browser or saw it in their app or built their app and saw it execute, they knew they made mistakes while they were doing mistakes. And I'd rather have that kind of teaching for people than having lots of like, oh, here's 10,000 debuggers that you have to learn now as well. So looking at Chrome DevTools or Firefox DevTools or even F12, I'm sometimes overwhelmed. I'm just looking at those like, what are all these tabs? What are all these things doing? I want to get like 2 weeks to actually go through it and learn all of them before I do something useful with them. But we can't do that. What I like as well is that we extended our languages to become more stricter. TypeScript is a JavaScript with type systems on top, which is basically necessary to write huge JavaScript applications, which we do nowadays. I remember I worked on a certain map provider, and I got the source code of another map provider, and it was 1 million lines of JavaScript in one file. I'm not kidding you. Without any, like re-architecting this thing was impossible to do. With TypeScript, I can do it. There's an interesting trick in Visual Studio Code if you use it. You can use @tscheck as a comment on top of it, and you get the TypeScript checker and the insights about what's going on there, what's wrong. So it just does the curly lines for saying like, okay, you didn't initialize that variable, for example, and it found all the things that it does for you. So if you don't want to use TypeScript and you just want to get your JavaScript to actually test this is a simple way of doing it. And of course, there's other editors. There's Atom that's doing that right now. But I like this one because it's really fast, it's really small, and I can hack around with it the way I want to. Atom is written in CoffeeScript. I wasn't that excited about CoffeeScript because it's kind of not like JavaScript anymore. But whatever you want to do. We have collaborative editing and education tools. I mean, this just came into Visual Studio Code where you can actually see while somebody else is coding and their name next to it, so you can actually explain people while they're using it, what they're doing. It's like being on a Skype call without having to be on a Skype call and get all the timeouts and these kind of things, but basically have a faster connectivity. CodePen had that for a while, JSBin had that, glitch.com is another great one to do that, and Atom just said that there's an extension that you can do that as well. And I love that. I love being able to just go into the code and work with people and say like, here's your problem. Or write a little comment above it, and instead of telling people, go to line so-and-so, you just, let's go there together, and here's what's going on there. This is pretty cool. I mean, when Google Docs started collaborative writing the first time, like, this is friggin' amazing, I want to have that. And I want to have that in everything, and we don't have it in everything yet, because being online all the time is not possible either. Linting and validation tools tell us what to fix, even as a continuous integration step. If you haven't looked at it yet, there's SonarWhal, which is an open source project by one of my colleagues in the Edge team. It has been donated to the JS Foundation, so a lot of people are working on that one right now. So that one, you give it a URL, and it tells you all the things that are not to spec, or that might be a performance problem, or a security issue, or an accessibility issue with your website. And it explains it in a non-condescending way. It says like, here's the problem, here's how to fix it. Here's the issue. And you can have that as a command line installer, npm install SonarWhal, and then run it in a continuous integration against your builds, so you find out when things happen before your end users have to report them for you. Now, everything counts in large amounts, and that's a big problem that we have right now, that the web of past, where you could write a few lines of code and everything was cool, people expect more these days. And especially our users expect more because they have much more capable devices with higher computation power than in the past. An iPhone, an Android, and high-end Android is just amazing what you think about what they're doing right now. Yeah, I've got an asterisk there where I say like our users, and these are the affluent and local users our investors and our sales and marketing departments care about. Because there's many, many people on this world that should get your content but will never ever be able to get it because they're on a low connectivity, they're on an old iPhone, and it hurts me, and I'm totally agreeing with the last speaker about this, that we're making a World Wide Web into a welcome Western world or rich people here only. And we just had the problem in America with like some content only being for extra payment soon on the internet. And this is not what we thought about when we wanted to make the internet a thing. So, but even ourselves, when we have, it doesn't matter how fast our computer is, we find ways to make it slow. It doesn't matter how big our hard drive is, we find ways to fill it up 75%. It's always fascinating. When I get a new computer, like 1 terabyte, never going to be full with that. And I'm like, how am I out of space again? What did I download these 4K versions of Rick and Morty or whatever? We just push things in and we hoard until it gets there. The technologies we have at our disposal are complex and have higher computation demands. I mean, when I look at JavaScript, where it's been going the last 5 years, it's just amazing. I mean, video and audio can be generated, can be converted, can be changed in the browser itself. I have SVG running really, really smoothly and really fast. I can finally properly use it. I can use WebGL to do 3D stuff, to do even VR stuff in the browser. Browsers are not these HTML, CSS things anymore. People expect more, and we have more opportunities to do things. WebAssembly is a very interesting point right now, to run other languages in the browser, for example, and of course to run 3D engines in the browser. To play proper AAA games in the browser without having to have the problem of the DOM slowing it down or the painting of the browser or other tabs getting in your way. I think we have a longer distance between code creation and execution with optimization steps in between, because people expect more complexity, we have more capable environments, so we have to find a better way to do it than to say, like, look at view source. Looking at view source nowadays is pretty much pointless, because every website that has something to do with performance will do something with minification, will do some changing. You will never look at the code that everybody gets. You will get the code optimized for your experience in that environment that you're actually looking at the website right now. So the whole like view source should never die. Yes, developer tools are the new view source, or actually the source on GitHub is the new view source rather than the thing that we generate for our end users. The business demands on our creations are about fast delivery and constant innovation. This demands reuse and automation. That's the big thing as well. We cannot just say like, okay, this website will now be forever. Cool, but the client will want different things. They want new things. They see something in iOS 11 is coming out. Can my website have that as well? Of course, it makes no sense that he has it, but he wants it. And they pay our money sooner or later, and that's why we can afford great. That's why we live. With increased complexity and demand, any software product will sooner or later use pre-built components. This is why I stopped at the demo scene and building games and these kind of things, because sooner or later it was all about, like, here's the SDK, here's the packages, use these, put them together, make a game. I'd rather wanted to do, like, go down to the metal and actually find out what the computer is doing there and what we're doing here, and so on and so forth. And if I go nowadays at any tutorial and it says like, okay, you use npm-g, install those, and then you use that library, and then you write a template, and you change the colors around, and you got an app. And I'm like, excellent, but what is my part of this? How do I own this? How is this my app? I just used other people's stuff because we have to do it fast and we have to do it continuously. We're thinking we're carpenters of like Chippendale environment when people want like IKEA furniture, and I guess maybe that's the okay thing to do. And I'm not saying that NPM is bad at all. I think it's a very, very good thing to have reusable components. I just want to make sure that those components are safe, that they're actually performing well, and it's not a competition of who has the most NPM modules out there, but actually who has the best ones for our end user. And this even flows over into the design space. Style guides, pattern libraries, we do the same thing there. Instead of just saying like, okay, we do a wonderful design, we write some clever CSS with like, here's Bootstrap, put a hero image on there, and a big button, please contact us, and 2 buttons, download our app, that's the website, yay. So it gets very predictable when you look at what websites look these days. I'm going to speak at awards in Berlin in January, and it's like the coolest, amazing websites. It's going to be interesting what they're going to have this year, and I'm going to be very loud if it's the same thing I've seen over and over again. The problem is, humans are sloppy and clumsy. So whenever we want to reuse something, and when something bores us, this increases with boredom and a demand to do repetitive tasks. When you ask the 50th time to do a bootstrap layout, you probably will write some sloppy code because the browser fixes it anyways. We're not involved, we're not excited about it, and then we get sloppy. That's why automation of factories is just a given. Humans should not get bored and tired of using machinery and then hurt themselves because they get bored and tired. Machines don't get tired, so let them do that job. Our programs and automated tools shine when it comes to repetitiveness and boring tasks that are always the same ones. I love this by Calvin Hobbes. Given the pace of technology, I propose we leave math to the machines and go play outside. And I sometimes feel that. Like, why is it 2017 and I'm still going to a command line? Why is it so hard to build a scalable website that actually performs well? Why is it so hard that actually everybody builds an app because they want to make money rather than giving people a proper API to use? This was an interesting thing by Google the other day called autodraw. So you draw something like this, and it recognizes what the shape is, and then you press a button, and it makes a proper icon out of it. And this is great for people like me who can't paint for toffee, but basically want to do something. And what I love most about this, not that it is there, that it has a clever deep learning algorithm to find these shapes and these kind of things, but how it was fed. It was fed a few years ago with a game called Quick Draw by Google that asked people to, hey, can you doodle a coffee cup? Hey, can you doodle an elephant? Hey, can you do this? And this became the training data set for that new app right now. And this is cool. This is what I like. You know, if you ask people to do work, human work, and you put it into a data set, give them something at the end out of it that actually they can do, not just take their data and run. So this is, I'm saying, thank you, Google, this is really cool. And it's a really great example of what can be done with human input and a clever algorithm, and then a nice interface to do something amazing with that. This could have been something that is an API, this could have been a sketch plugin, all kind of things, but they're just saying like, oh, it's easy to do a painting thing in the browser, why not? There's an interesting meme going around with the, every time there was a television show about computers, and it was always like the let's enhance thing. You know, like when like NCIS or something like that, there's like grainy footage of CCTV, and somebody's like, oh, look at that, isn't that a car? And they're like, oh, zoom in on the license plate. Oh, this license plate has a screw on it. Look at the reflection of the person in the screw, and there's another car with another license plate. And like, you know, like the really grainy footage had like the whole jets in it, and you're like, what? This was always the thing that drove me nuts about these. But there's a company called now Let's Enhance.io, and they do that. When you have a JavaScript, when you have a JPEG with really terrible artifacts in there, you can actually fill in the mistakes of it by comparing it with trillions of other photos. This sounds like magic, but this is actually not that hard to do if you think about it. This has been around. There's a paper from SyysGraph last year that actually showed something about that. And a lot of companies do that to also enhance scans automatically in their hardware. But now there's an API for that out there. So what it does, it actually it compares the image with other images that are very, very similar, and then makes the lines sharper and fills in the data kind of magically, but it actually just does it by having a massive data set to compare it with. And we're now at that, like, let's enhance from nowhere. And this is pretty amazing if you think about it. So what they called it, actually not, this is another one. And this is, I'm working with that right now, and I just saw it, and I'm like, this is nuts. Airbnb did something pretty amazing right now. They said, like, we built an initial prototype using about a dozen of hand-drawn components as training data, open source machine learning algorithms, and a small amount of intermediary code to render components from our design systems into the browser. This sounds like nothing, but this is what it looks like. So what they can do now is paint on paper, hold it in front of a camera, and get the website created, published, and put on the live server. It's not hard. They have a very, very, well, of course it's hard, but they have a very strict guideline. So their design system has only a certain amount of features that can be on every website. And now they actually just did an outline algorithm that is similar to what they're actually painting there. And now you can doodle your new websites. And you know what? Why not? If you already have a design system that's so strict, making your developers copy and paste different things from the design system into templates, that just sounds error-prone to me. This makes much more sense. And this is, I think, where we're going. That's what I meant with like code writing code. By writing reusable components, by having NPM modules that load other NPM modules, and then trying to set up Webpack to undo all the damage that we've done by putting too many things in, machines are better in finding these things out. We should not use our brain power to do these boring, repetitive tasks. So when I think about skills of the future, and I don't think about coding alone, I'm thinking about training data, I'm thinking about machine learning algorithms that are open source, and I'm thinking about design systems. These are all different skills, and I love that machine learning and deep learning gives us an opportunity to have people who might not be good at coding, but are very good at finding patterns in things or finding the right data to combine with other data, can now be programmers without programming, and why not? So I'm questioning the dogma that everybody must learn how to code, and I'm actually saying everybody must learn how to solve problems. This could be a doodle, this could be a song, this could be talking to somebody, this could be making things with your hands. Code is not the end all to everything. It's just one tool in our whole arsenal as humans that we have, and machines have code. They can be coding, we can't actually do as much. So I think it's important to move from the how to the why. Great Twitter name, Idiot Girl. It's not the tools library's fault for being what they are, but it's somewhat the fault in the marketing evangelism vague terminology imho. Plenty of people tell you how to do something, no one explains why. He's like, here's how to use React. Why is React the right solution at that time for this tool, for this product? Why is CSS the right tool to do that, whereas JavaScript is the thing that you know, and you tell people you should use JavaScript? You don't like CSS? Don't take part in CSS discussions. You're not meant to be there. You're not happy there. Don't be in places where you're unhappy. So let's focus more on the human and less on trying to be machines. We won't win this race. Code can generate code. Humans can generate humans, but it's a different story. But code cannot generate human emotions, ethics, and ideas. And this is what we need right now if you don't want to be run over by an automated future that gives us boring things that are easy to consume, but not interesting, and don't make us happy while we're creating it. I've had 20 years of fun doing what I'm doing. I love that every year I have to challenge myself and learn something new and feel worried about my skill set. Who else can say that? In what other job do you get well paid and you can also think that? This is a wonderful problem to have. Working well with people is 1,000 times more important than working well with code. Don't get so lost in solving app problems that you don't spend any time solving people problems. So when you're going into the hackathon right now, I actually want you to think about to go out and play with the technology to create something great, something human, something beautiful. And if you don't win, at least you had fun building something human. And that's all I had, so thanks very much.